In 2000, Nortel was worth $250 billion. It employed 100,000 people. By 2009, it was gone. 20,000 retirees lost their pensions. Here's the story nobody tells. In the year 2000, this company was worth $250 billion. It employed almost 100,000 people. It was so big that all by itself, it was worth about a third of Canada's entire stock market. One company, a third of everything. 9 years later, it was gone, bankrupt, erased, and around 20,000 retirees who had worked their whole lives lost the pensions they were promised. You've probably never even heard its name. This is the story of Nortel, and nobody tells them. Let me explain it like you're 5. Imagine the biggest, safest company you can think of. Now imagine it's so huge that if you added up every other company in the whole country, this one would still be a third of the total. That was Nortel. People put their life savings into it because everyone agreed on one thing: Nortel could never fall. So how does something that big just disappear? Stick with me, because the answer isn't bad luck. It was a series of choices made by people who walked away just fine. But to understand the fall, you first have to see the rise. Our story starts over 100 years ago. Back in the 1800s, Nortel wasn't a tech company at all. It was a small Canadian company that made telephones. Actual, physical telephones. The ones with the spinny dial. For decades, that's all it was. Boring, reliable, slow. It made phones, it sold phones, nobody got excited, and then the world changed. In the 1990s, something new arrived that needed a lot of wires. The internet. Suddenly, the whole planet wanted to get online. And to get online, you needed equipment. Cables, routers, special glass wires called fiber optics. Fiber optics could carry information as pulses of light, incredibly fast. And guess who was really good at making them? Nortel. The boring old telephone company had quietly become a master of the exact technology the internet was starving for. It was like selling shovels in a gold rush. Everyone was digging for internet gold, and Nortel sold the shovels. Money came pouring in. The company grew and grew and grew. It bought up other companies, dozens of them, spending billions. Its stock price went straight up. Investors couldn't buy it fast enough. Teachers, retirees, ordinary families, they all wanted a piece. In Canada, it became a point of national pride. We have a tech giant too, and it's beating the Americans. By the year 2000, the stock hit its peak. The company was worth around $250 billion. It made up roughly a third of the value of the entire Toronto Stock Exchange. If you owned a Canadian mutual fund, you almost certainly owned Nortel. Whether you knew it or not, it was everywhere. It was unstoppable. It was, everyone said, too important to fail. And that is always the most dangerous sentence in the world. Because here's the thing about a balloon. The bigger it gets, the more everyone forgets it's full of air. The internet boom was partly real, and partly a fantasy. Companies with no profits and silly names were worth billions on paper. They were all buying Nortel's equipment with borrowed money. And then, in 2001, the fantasy ended. The dot-com bubble burst. All those internet companies that owed money suddenly went broke. And broke companies don't buy fiber optic shovels. Nortel's orders didn't slow down. They fell off a cliff. The money that had been pouring in just stopped. And now we get to the part that turned a disaster into a scandal. Because as the real business was collapsing, the numbers Nortel was showing the public didn't always match reality. Here's the simple version. When times were good, the company had quietly tucked away extra money in hidden piles. Accountants call them reserves. Think of it like a secret cookie jar of profits. Now, when the business was crashing and the real numbers looked terrible, those secret cookie jars could be opened. Pull money out of the jar, and suddenly the company looks profitable again, even when it isn't. And why would executives want the company to look profitable at that exact moment? Here's the ugly part. Top executives had bonuses promised to them for returning the company to profit, so the accusation was devastatingly simple. They allegedly used the hidden money to fake a recovery, trigger their own bonuses, and pay themselves tens of millions of dollars, while the company underneath them was dying. When investigators caught on, the company had to admit its numbers were wrong. It restated its earnings twice. The CEO and several top executives were fired in 2004. They were accused of accounting fraud. Years of lawsuits and trials followed. And here's the part that makes people furious. After all of it, the executives were not sent to prison. In the criminal case, they were found not guilty. But by then, it didn't matter for the company. The trust was gone. The business was gone. The stock that was once worth over $100 was now worth pennies. $250 billion of value, simply gone. On January 14, 2009, Nortel filed for bankruptcy. The giant was dead, and now came the vultures. Because even a dead company owns valuable things. Nortel's most precious treasure was its patents, thousands of them, inventions covering the core technology of modern phones and the internet. These patents were auctioned off, and a group of the biggest tech companies on Earth, Apple, Microsoft, and others, teamed up and bought them for about $4.5 billion. The pieces of Nortel got scattered to the very giants that replaced it. But while billionaires fought over the patents, one group was left standing in the cold. Remember the 20,000 retirees? These were people who had given Nortel their entire careers, 30, 40 years of work. In exchange, they were promised a pension, money to live on when they got old. But a company pension is only as safe as the company. And the company was bankrupt. The pension fund didn't have enough money to pay everyone what was promised, so retirees had their pensions cut. People who had budgeted their whole retirement around a number suddenly got less. Sometimes a lot less. Imagine being 70 years old and finding out the money you counted on is shrinking and there's nothing you can do. Multiply that by 20,000 families, and here's the detail that truly stings. During the bankruptcy, the company was allowed to pay millions in bonuses to keep key executives and managers from leaving. So at the same table where retirees were losing their pensions, money was being handed out at the top to stop people from quitting. The people at the bottom lost what they were promised. The people near the top got paid to stay. If that pattern sounds familiar, it should. Because this is not just a story about one company. It's a story about how the biggest, safest, most certain thing can vanish almost overnight. And how, when it does, the pain almost never lands on the people who made the decisions. Nortel was once a third of a country's entire stock market. Today, most people have never heard the name. The buildings were sold, the logo disappeared, the 100,000 jobs scattered to the wind, and the retirees were left to fight for scraps of the fortune they helped build. So the next time someone tells you a company is too big to fail or too important to fall, remember the telephone company that became a giant, touched $250 billion, and then disappeared so completely that the world simply forgot it ever existed. That's the story of Nortel. And the most chilling part? It can happen again. It probably already is.
If you enjoyed the video, hit subscribe and click the bell button for more updates. See you in the next episode of Stick Market.